Now, this is probably one of the most famous stories in the Bible. Everyone in the world knows about that. I don't know if you have friends like my friends, but they'll say, you know what, Jesus turned water into wine, so wine is good, right? That's not really the point of the story, but it's the piece that we all remember, right? That Jesus turned water into wine. Is that okay? I mean, is it okay? No, he turned water into grape juice. No, guys, it was wine. It's fine. Relax. It's okay. This is not a bad thing. You know, the idea, we'll get it out. But there's a reason water into wine. And it's not so much about a party, guys. It's about eternity. So let's read together. John chapter 2, verse 1. On the third day, a wedding took place at Cana in Galilee. Note here, Jesus' mother was there. Don't ever think these things are by mistake. It's on purpose. Jesus' mother was there. And Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." Woman. Now, guys, if you have your YouVersion, it's the perfect place. Sometimes you'll see that these little speech bubbles. Click them. There's like gold inside of those little speech bubbles, right? When you click this speech bubble, usually it will take you to like where this passage is quoted from. Like if Jesus is quoting scripture, it'll show you where he's quoting from or things like that. It's beautiful. This one, when you click it, it just says, this word is not derogatory. He was not being disrespectful. He wasn't saying woman. And this is, I just want to take a moment here. This is where you and I need to also understand we place our culture on the Bible, instead of taking the Bible's culture and placing it on us, right? So we see woman and we're like, whoa. Because also Jesus has been flipping tables, he's been snarky, he's been doing all kinds of stuff. And then you're like, yeah, he must have just been a bit of an attitude-filled Jesus, you know? No. He was saying woman, mother, person of value in my life. Okay, let's keep reading. Woman, why do you involve me? Jesus replied, my hour has not yet come. Note these words. Verse 5. His mother said to the servants, do whatever he tells you. Okay, we're going to take a break from the text there. This is how it's set up. There's a wedding. And at this wedding, Jesus' mother is there. Jesus and his disciples are also invited. And they run out of wine. Now, why did they run out of wine? Because people were drinking the wine, right? People are having fun at this party, right? The Bible's the Bible. Guys, relax. It's okay. There was a big fun party going on, and everyone had been drinking probably a little bit more than they should have, and they ran out of wine. This is going to be important because later on in the story, we're going to see why. Then, for some reason, Jesus' mom comes to him, Mary comes to him and says, they have no more wine. And Jesus says to her, why are you involving me in this? It's not my time yet. And her response to that is just to tell everyone, whatever he tells you, just do it. So I have this question. Why did Jesus hesitate? Did Jesus have the power to do the miracle? Yes. Did Jesus know he had the power to do the miracle? Yes. So why did he hesitate? He says his time has not yet come. He's waiting for something. He's waiting. He knows that there's something big in his future, but he's waiting for it. Now, I want to say to everybody here, have you ever been in a space like this? Have you ever been in a place where you felt unprepared for your future? Where you felt like, man, God, the task you're asking me to do is way too big. And so you're almost hesitant to take the step. Where you're thinking, I think in my own life, imagine that day when you were in high school and you had to do speech day. Everybody remember speeches. Everybody remember Afrikaans speeches. Now, if you're Afrikaans watching or in this place, I'm so happy for you. But I struggled, guys. It wasn't easy for me. And I would get to class and I'd have my speech prepared. I didn't understand a word, but I knew how to say it, right? You'd be fooled. You'll think, man, this guy speaks good Afrikaans. I'm just like saying words. Who knows what they mean? And you get to class that day and you know it's speech day, you know it's coming, and you sit down and you're just praying, please ask me to come last, right? I don't know if you've ever been there. What happens that day? They call you first. Always, every time. And you're like, man, can't I do it later? And you come and you're like, die Hond bluff, you know, like, I had that experience every time, and I'm good at speaking. So I know for some people it's like anxiety is real difficult. I almost feel like in a way it's kind of like this. I don't feel like Jesus is scared. But he knows something. This is what I want you to see. He knows that once he starts the signs, he can't stop the signs. Once this train leaves the station, it's headed to a cross. And there's nothing he can do to stop it. And so the human in Jesus probably for a while has known his time's coming. But he needs it. He doesn't want to just step out. He needs it to be God. And this is where I want to show you something. This is a message to all the mothers in the room. Did Mary control Jesus? It's a question mark. Obviously, she didn't. But if you read this text, especially with our culture, and place it on this text, it'll seem like Mary's pushing Jesus aside and saying, you have to do it. They've run out of wine. Do something about it. Almost like Mary has power over Jesus. Not at all. That's not what's going on here. What I want you to see here is that Mary placed her faith in her son. She knew that whatever he said would happen. And she wasn't trying to tell him what to do. She was trying to say, I believe in you. And this is a message I have to every mother in the room. Every young mother, every grandmother who has little ones that you're taking care of. Right now I want to say to every mother, you have special insight. You know the future of your children. You know what God has planned for them. Mary's story, if you read it in Luke, they talk about when Jesus was a child and how he was teaching, and he stays and he gets lost, that whole story, and they can't find Jesus. They find him in the temple teaching the teachers of the law at 12 years old. And she says to him, why did you do this to me? Why would you run away like that? I was so worried about you. And Jesus is like, it was about my Father's business. What's your problem, And it says these words, Mary watched all of this and kept it in her heart. I believe when you connect that to this story, you start to see Mary knew. And Jesus just needed his mom to say, I believe in you. You might not feel prepared, but I know God has prepared you for anything. And mothers in the room, when you get behind your children and they say, I'm scared, Mom. I'm scared of university. I'm scared of that job. I'm scared to start that business. I want to be married, but I'm scared of that relationship. You can stand behind them and say, I believe in you. And God is more than enough in your life. Moms, you have a special insight into your kids' life. Use it to support them, not to control them. You might have a thought as to where your child's going to end up. I don't think Mary ever imagined that Jesus would end up on a cross. She just knew that he had a big purpose. So don't try to control your kids, but know that your support will take them where no one else can take them. I believe that with all my heart. Amen. So mothers, you have this special insight, but in this moment, Jesus has a choice to make. Okay, he looks at his mom, he sees the faith, and he says, I have to respond. I mean, Jesus is God. You can't please God without faith. Nothing pleases God except faith. And so in this moment, he responds, just like God responds to our faith. Jesus responds to the faith he feels in the room. And he says these words. We read, John Chapter 2, verse 6 says this, nearby stood 6 stone water jars. Everybody say with me, 6 stone water jars. Highlight it, write it down, do whatever you got to do. 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing, each holding from 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to the servants, fill the jars with water. So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, now draw some out and take it to the master of the banquet. And they did so. And the master of the banquet tasted the water that had been turned into wine. He did not realize where it had come from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew. He then called the bridegroom aside. We're going to read more of that in a moment. So here's the moment. Jesus decides, okay, I'm going to go. Once I perform this sign, I can't stop. People are going to talk about me. My ministry is going to start, and that's it. And he decides, all right, God, I'm in. Let's go. Let the signs begin. And he takes these 6 stone water jars. used for ceremonial washing. And he fills them with water. And he doesn't touch it. He doesn't speak over it. He just fills them up with water. And then he says to the servants, go and draw some of that water and take it. By the time they took that water to the master of ceremonies, he drank it, and it was now wine. And we're going to read a bit more about that later. But I have to ask you the question, why water into wine? I don't know if you've ever asked this question. There's an obvious reason. The party needed more wine. But there's a much deeper reason as to why water into wine. Let me ask you the question. Why 6 stone water jars? Well, none of us would be able to answer that question because none of us have ceremonial washing jars in our homes. Anybody got a ceremonial washing jar? Anybody know what a ceremonial washing jar is for? No. So let's not put our culture on it. Let's let it speak to us, right? Why stone water jars? Okay, let's talk about it. 6 stone ceremonial washing jars. What was it for? Well, in the Jewish culture, there's this idea that, you can become unclean. And there are so many ways that can happen. A woman who might be on her period is considered unclean. Now, we're not going to go into the depths of these ideas, but there's many ways that if you touch the wrong kind of animal, or you eat the wrong kind of food, or you do all kinds of things, you can become unclean. But you don't stay that way. You come and you wash. And when you wash, you become clean. You transfer, come on guys, your sin and uncleanliness into the water, and the water takes it away from you. Now here's the thing. We have to also see that everything in the Bible is on purpose, because you don't only get stone ceremonial washing jars, you also get clay ceremonial washing jars. Now what's the difference? A stone one is built to last. How they would make it is they would take one stone and they would hew this jar out of it. And it was big. It was about the size of this. In fact, I've got a picture. Guys, put the picture up for me. It's the last slide in the preach space. Not that. It's coming. Hey, there we go. You see, it was about this big. That's how big it was. And they were filled to the brim, right? And so they were carved out of one stone thing. The clay ones were not built to last. They were ones that were quick. They were cheaper to build. They were easier to build. They would just kind of fashion them out of clay. But there was a big difference. Because the water that was inside the clay jars, when you washed yourself with that water, the clay itself became unclean. And when you were done washing, you had to break it. But a stone washing jar did not become unclean. And so when you washed your hands in it, you would pour the water out and the jar itself would remain clean. These are very important ideas for us to understand. And so the Jewish people knew that what these things were for. And they knew that if they were unclean, they could go there, they could wash, and they could become clean. And so I'm going to take this idea. I want you to keep it in your mind. I'm going to explain it, then we'll bring this message to a close. It was 6 stone washing jars, not 2, not 12, 6. Why 6? Well, if you're new to church, numbers have a meaning in the Bible, every single one. 7, we spoke about already, is the number of completion. It's the number of the finished work of God, of the cross. Number 6 is human beings. It's the number of man. That's when, even if you look in Revelation, which we won't get into today, the number of the beast is 666. It's this idea of man, of us, separate from God, right? That's the number 6. Now, he could have had 5 stone jars. He could have had any, but there was 6. Okay, so man. Number 2, stone. Why stone? Number 1, stone was worth more. It didn't become unclean. But deeper than that, when you see in the book of John specifically, because you're going to see it a few more times, when he talks about stone, he's talking about the law. Why? Because Jesus wrote on stone tablets the 10 commandments that he gave to Moses. And Moses took these stone tablets to the people of Israel. And from there, the law of Moses, the Mosaic law, was birthed. It was like a constitution for the the nation of Israel. And remember what we've spoken about already. The law is where you get righteousness. You come and you sacrifice and you get righteousness for your sin through the law. But what does Jesus say? No longer will you get righteousness from the law. You get it from me. And so it's got to be stone, not clay. Not clay that can become unclean. No, stone that remains clean forever. Okay? So stone is the law. Water. Why water jars and why water into wine? Well, water is righteousness that lasts for a time. You wash yourself in the water and you become clean. But you become dirty again or unclean, you must go and wash again and again. You got to keep coming back to that water. And when you get thirsty, you got to drink again. And when you get thirsty, you got to drink again. And when you get thirsty, you got to drink again. But we're going to find next week, I'll give you a quick preview, that Jesus says, I have water that when you drink, you will never thirst again. So why water into wine? Follow with me. Later on in Jesus' life, he will break bread with his disciples before he goes to the cross. And when they're done eating, he will say to them, this bread is my body broken for you. Then he'll take a cup of wine and they will all drink. And he says to them, this wine is a representation of my blood that cuts a new covenant. In this moment, this is not about a party. This is not about a wedding. This is not about drinking wine. This is about water that lasts for a moment, becoming righteousness that lasts forever in Jesus. It is the old covenant becoming the new covenant. It is man searching for righteousness in the law, but finding it in the wine, the bread of life, Jesus and his sacrifice. Come on, today, you got to start to see that what is John trying to do? He's not trying to tell you about Jesus doing an amazing thing by turning water into wine. No, he's trying to say this is a sign. This is the first sign to show you that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and in him there is life. You can run to the law time and time again, but when man runs to the stone, he finds water. But when he runs to Jesus, he finds wine that satisfies forever.